Hi, everybody. I'm Dave Gold from Crossroads Psychological Associates, and I'm here with my partner, Matt Otto. And we're going to talk a little bit today about, going back to school and what our kids are going to be facing when they go back to school, considering that we're still in the middle of a pandemic.
hmm It's absolutely still a challenge, and I feel like, in some ways, the video we did about this in the spring when it all started, and be patient with your kids and all that, is as relevant as ever. And I feel like we did that video yesterday, and I feel like and other times it feels like we did that video years ago. So it's been a very crazy few months here for us. And my kids actually started back to school this week. So we are right in the middle of dealing with it all. And it's been an adventure. It's been a real adventure. My kids, I like to think of as being generally very intelligent and strong, and they've struggled with it. It's been hard. Each one of them has at some point in the last couple of days been either in tears or on the verge of tears about a variety of different things. It's missing their friends. It's not wanting to do this again. It is switching from elementary school to middle school and now having to log into a lot more systems than before and getting overwhelmed and confused, not just by the different systems, but just by the different schedule in general. Um, it's my oldest daughter didn't receive a whole lot of instruction for Spanish 1 because she took that last year, the second half of the year. So despite her teacher's best efforts, a lot of that was very minimal. And now she's going into Spanish 2 and expected to hit the ground running and feeling extremely overwhelmed by all that. So it's difficult. It's very difficult. And if my kids, who I think of as being strong and independent and intelligent, are struggling with it, I can't imagine what some of the folks who we work with, who have kids who have some more severe emotional challenges, some more severe learning challenges, are going to go through. It's going to be very difficult, especially those first few days of adjusting and getting ready for it.
Well, it's all so new. None of us really have a good idea what to expect. It's going to be different than it was the end of last year. Um, but even the teachers who are putting this together, you know, they're still getting guidelines and mandates from their school system, even as late as this week.
hmm
What strikes me when you were talking about your kids is there's kind of this expectation that they should be able to do so many more things just about logging in and systems and such. They're expected to do that independently, and that's a lot for elementary school age kids, even middle school age kids.
hmm It is. And even just the act of sitting in front of a screen for however many hours and listening and participating in synchronous instruction, right? You and I have talked about this a lot over the last few months, where screens used to be a way to unwind. They used to be a way to distract ourselves, and now we're having to focus on the screen for work for 8 hours a day, and it's exhausting in a very different way than being in the office is exhausting.
It
And our
really
kids
is.
did not do, did very minimal synchronous instruction back in the spring. Most of it was asynchronous, and now they're having to hop on and do 3.5, 4 hours a day synchronous instruction. And it's draining and it's exhausting, and they're not used to it. They want to have their screen in front of them to veg out and watch TV. Plus, just focusing on this little box, as opposed to be able to look around, do other things, can be really draining and straining on the eyes and everything else. So our kids are having to adjust to that too, and it's a lot. Just the logistical hurdles, the emotional hurdles, on top of regular schooling. This isn't the pared down curriculum that a lot of our public school kids had in the spring. The teachers are doing their best to give them a really full, robust curriculum, which is great. The kids need it. They need that kind of engagement. But at the same time, it's just one more overwhelming piece that our kids are having to deal with right now.
That's such a good point. And, one of the other things is the primary support for a lot of our kids, it's us, it's the parents.
Mhm.
And the parents are feeling overwhelmed just as the kids are. You and I were talking about this. During school hours now, you have a whole bunch of parents that are both trying to help their kids, structure their kids, support their kids, while also working full time.
Yep. Yep.
So it's not just that they can't do everything, but naturally the parents' level of anxiety goes up,
Hmm.
and that just raises the kids' level of anxiety.
Yeah, I was just a couple other small anecdotes there. We had a colleague who gave us a call a couple nights ago because they were having some technical difficulties. And normally you or I are the ones who try and help them take care of that. And I had to text back and say, sorry, I'm running IT support at home this week and can't come to the office. We're gonna have to find a different way to do this. So yeah, it's compounding on our own stress and our own anxiety too. And then, my youngest daughter, the one who's going into middle school, the night before the first night of classes, she just came down to me in the verge of tears, um, because she thought she had logged in and then she lost her login. Her login wasn't working properly, so she wanted me to fix it. And she tends to get like really tense and teary when she gets overwhelmed and stressed like that. And so she's standing over my shoulder as I'm trying to figure this out and teach her about it at the same time. And, just a couple times took a break. Honey, take a few deep breaths, calm down. It'll be okay. And finally, because my anxiety, because I'm trying to figure out what's wrong with the computer and deal with her at the same time. So my own anxiety keeps going like this. And I finally had to turn around to her at one point and say, look, you have two choices right now. You can take a couple deep breaths and you can calm yourself down and we can do this together, or you can walk away and let me figure it out and then I will come teach you how to do it. But this isn't working. And
Right.
she took a minute, she finally took her couple deep breaths, she calmed herself down, we figured it out. But we have to be really aware of our own emotional responses of this too, because if we don't manage ourselves well, I could have easily blown up on my daughter that night. If it was a different night, if it had happened, last night when I was getting the text from our colleague and, had a full day at work and everything else, if that same thing had happened that night, I could easily have seen myself blowing up at her about it. And so we have to be really aware of our own emotions so that we can calm ourselves down or give ourselves permission to take a break or give our kids permission to take a break so that we're in a better emotional state to handle those problems.
Managing the stress, managing the anxiety, just like you say, that's got to be a priority. What's natural for us as humans, and you and I have talked about this, the best way for our nervous systems to regulate, beginning when we're infants, is to reach out and feel connected and attached to someone else. And there are plenty of studies that support this.
Mhm.
And you look at what our kids are going through doing this online learning this semester, it's much harder, if not impossible, to be able to reach out and feel connected to your teacher, to feel connected to your friends. So we're putting them in this new novel situation, but it's so isolating.
Mhm.
And we just kind of have to expect they're going to be reaching out to us. And the nature of the beast is they're going to do it right when we have a deadline at work.
Yeah, they are. Um, I think we need to be creative and we need to listen to our kids, right? We need to have conversations with our kids about what is it that is stressing them out? What is it that they need help with? What are times that we can set aside as parents to help them through those things? And what are some ways that we can be creative about helping them through the things that are stressing them out? Just a few things that I've heard either from my own kids or from people that I'm working with. One is just the whole idea of doing school from their rooms and having other kids in their class who they're not necessarily friends with have access to their bedroom, for one, right? Because now
Yeah,
you've got
yeah.
their bedroom in the background and they can see everything that or everything or a portion of what's in their room. So maybe being creative about where you set up the space for them to be. You know, in our house, our kids have to work from their rooms because we just don't have enough room for my wife to work from home and me to work from home and the three of them to all work from home and be in a more centralized location. So they're all in their rooms. But for my one daughter who was really worried about it, we put a sheet up. Just took thumbtacks and tacked it into the ceiling, and she's got a sheet behind her workspace so that all the other kids see is a blank wall, really. So that's one thing to really be sensitive of, because that's serious. And maybe with some kids it's turning off the camera if that's allowed, or they just do a quick check-in to let their teacher know they're really there, and then they turn it off. Some teachers are being flexible and allowing that. Other school systems not so much. So you need to be in contact with your teachers and be aware of what your kids are worried about. You know, another thing is just being aware of their physical movement. You know, kids would get up in between classes and move back and forth and spend lunch with their friends, and so be aware of their physical movement. Make them get up in between classes and do something like walk the dog. If they have 5 minutes between classes, maybe it's not a long walk, maybe it's just down to the stop sign and back. But make them get up and move around and do something. Encourage them to do breakout groups. If they've got a few minutes between classes, or if they've got a lunch break, encourage them to set up their own individual Zoom or Google Meet with a few of their friends, so that they can really have some social time and feel a little bit more connected with some of their friends.
Absolutely.
Some families are setting up study pods at home, or rotating through some different homes, so that kids can have one or two other kids from their class who are coming over and they're studying with on a regular basis. It might only be once a week, but at least that's once a week where they get some interaction with one or two of their friends. So be creative. There's a ton of other ideas out there. And just as a plug, on September 24th, one of our therapists, Brad Bernstein, who's also a school counselor in his day job, along with a county school counselor, elementary school counselor, who also happens to be my sister, are going to be joining us.
But don't hold that against her.
No, please don't. Are going to be joining us for a live webinar, and I'll be moderating that. So they will have a whole bunch of other creative ideas about how to help your kids through this, and how to work with the schools through it too. How best to be in communication with your teachers, with the school counselors about the challenges that they're facing. So we're doing like a real shallow dive into this today. And if you are available, hopefully they'll be able to do a much deeper dive on September 24th. And some of you are going, 24th, gosh, that's 2-3 weeks into the school year. That's okay. My wife and I have some ideas for what we want to do with our kids. And we told our kids before things even started, this is going to take us some time to get it all set up and running. We've got the essentials done for the first day of school, but some of these other things that they want to do, whether it's pods, whether it's setting up their room in a particular way, whether it's this or that, we told them it's going to take 3 or 4 weeks for us to get all of those things up and running and really get into it like normal. And that's normal, right? It doesn't feel normal right now, but even when school starts, sometimes clubs don't start until the middle of September, right? Sometimes other outside activities don't start until the beginning of October. So the regular schedule doesn't really get up and running the first day of school. And as parents, we've got to tell ourselves that's okay. We don't have to be perfect on day one. We're not going to be perfect even on month 2. So we've got to give ourselves grace as well, that, okay, we are going to just do our best to do this one day at a time.
You know, that's such an important point. You know, the bottom line is we're going to be faced with these new situations, and we're not going to know the answers right away.
Right.
And it's very easy to fall into, I don't know the answer now, therefore I will never know it. As opposed to, I don't know the answer now, but we'll be able to figure it out. You know, and that's what we need to keep front and center for ourselves. and to also teach our kids. The other, real important point you were making, we can divide people up into thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Okay. And a lot of us, when we think about school, we focus on the thoughts, the cognitive, the academic, and meeting those needs for our kids. But school provides so much more. There's a huge emotional component to school. There's a physical behavioral component to school. And we need to be aware of those needs that our kids have above and beyond the straight academics.
Right. When we did our first video, I talked about the autoimmunity schedule that we set up and put on our refrigerator. And just telling our kids that they had to do 30 minutes of physical activity and reading outside of school and that sort of thing. And we're sticking with that this fall, but we're making it a little bit more regimented in order to fit into their more regimented schedule. Right. So, walking the dog or doing a 30-minute exercise or whatever, we ended up kind of mapping it out half hour by half hour for our family schedule so that everyone could fit in their parts and their pieces. So there are things like that we can do, just being a little creative, what works with your family, to try to make sure that our kids are not just getting that academic support, but they're also getting emotional support and talking with friends and being physical. The other thing I'll say, for a lot of families that I work with and for my family as well, there has been a silver lining for this. We've been forced to slow down. We've been forced to do more family time. We've been forced to be creative. We do family hikes more regularly. We do family game time more regularly. We're kind of opening our eyes to the realization that we were overscheduled and running around too much. And we don't want to go back to that as things start to open up. So one thing that I'm really encouraging a lot of parents and families to do is don't lose those silver linings. As we get back into a regular schedule, even though it's not regular yet, but it's more scheduling and schools, more regimented. As we get back into that, don't lose those silver linings. Keep the family time that you have with your kids, the emotional relating that you've been able to develop over the last 5-6 months is precious. And our kids need that more than we realize. So make sure that's still on the schedule and don't discount it. If your kid has a half-hour lunch break and they don't have friends to do a Google Meet with that day, and so you take a half hour from your day and you sit down and you have lunch with them, that's precious. That's important. And let's not lose those moments as we get overwhelmed with the logistics of getting into a new school year.
Well, what's the old phrase? Don't waste a good crisis.
Yeah. Well, this is certainly a good one.
That's so important. That's so important.
Yeah. So school's opening this week, and Governor Hogan in Maryland here announced yesterday that we're entering phase 3 and businesses can start opening on a more regular basis. And just for people who might be listening, who might be interested in coming into Crossroads, to let you know, the state going into phase 3 does not change the fact that we have to follow the health regulations and recommendations of the CDC. So we will continue to slowly do more in-person appointments, still with the regulations of 6 feet apart, and check-ins from the parking lot. Our waiting room won't be open, and we're going to have staggered entries, and let people, and our clinicians are going to stagger their days as well. Because if you've been to our office, it's a pretty small office. We can be kind of cramped. So we're going to stagger days there too. So it's going to be a process for us coming back into person. But if you are interested in coming in person to meet with your clinician, now that we're in stage 3, that potentially is an option, depending on days and times. And just talk to your clinician about that. But we are starting to slowly move to that.
We're still going to have to wear masks during session, but we can do it in person. And the other part is, now that we're getting away from the overly hot and humid days of summer, we can do some sessions outside as the weather gets a little bit more comfortable.
Right. With masks, unfortunately. That's part
Yes.
of the CDC recommendations. Even if we're outside for a therapy session, we still have to be wearing masks.
Always masks. Thanks for listening to us. We'll be back with more videos.
Appreciate you joining us.
Take care.